Have you ever caught yourself thinking not about the moment you're in, but about how it will end? Maybe you're on a first date, already wondering whether it will fall apart. Maybe you're at a family gathering calculating when everyone will leave. Or maybe you're on vacation, unable to relax because the clock in your head is reminding you how few days are left. It's strange, isn't it? Even in moments we should be enjoying, part of our mind skips forward to the finale, as if the value of the present can only be measured by how it concludes. This tendency has a name in psychology: finalization. It's the human brain's deep need to see things complete, to give them a neat ending, even when reality is messy, open, or uncertain. And while this instinct makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, it also shapes how we experience happiness, anxiety, and even the meaning we attach to our lives. Today, we're going to unlock why your brain is obsessed with endings, and how understanding this hidden pattern can help you live more fully in the present. The roots of this go back to the way memory works. Your brain doesn't record life like a continuous film. Instead, it builds highlight reels. And what's fascinating is that our memories are biased toward two key moments: the emotional peak and the ending. Psychologists call this the peak-end rule. For example, imagine you're at a concert. If the music is incredible in the middle but the last song is weak, chances are your memory of the entire event will feel underwhelming. Conversely, if the ending is powerful, it can overshadow earlier flaws. Your brain evaluates experiences not by their full duration, but by how they end. That's why when you're living through something, you're unconsciously looking ahead. How will this wrap up? How will I feel when it's over? Your brain wants closure because closure defines the story it will later tell itself. But there's more. Philosophers have long noticed our obsession with endings. Think of the ancient Stoics who reminded themselves daily of death, not as a morbid practice, but as a way to sharpen the present. If everything ends, then every moment is charged with meaning. Existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus also pointed out that humans are storytelling creatures, and stories require conclusions. Without an ending, there's no arc, no coherence, no sense of who we are. So on both psychological and philosophical levels, the mind is constantly scanning for finality. This is why we replay breakups in our head, why unfinished projects weigh heavily on us, and why the thought of our own mortality both terrifies and motivates us. And yet this fixation is double-edged. On the one hand, it gives life its sense of narrative. On the other, it can drain the joy out of the present. Think about relationships. Instead of being in them, many of us analyze them from the outside. Where is this going? Will it last? Will it end in heartbreak? These thoughts may feel like preparation, but often they steal intimacy from the moment. The same is true in careers. Instead of engaging with the work itself, we obsess about the promotion, the resignation, the retirement. Life becomes a series of anticipated endings, and we miss the texture of the chapters in between. So why do we do this? Evolutionary psychology offers a clue. Early humans needed to predict outcomes to survive. If you hear rustling in the bushes, your brain doesn't linger on the sound. It leaps to the possible ending. If that's a predator, how does this story conclude for me? Anticipating the finale was a survival mechanism. But in the modern world, where threats are rarely lions hiding in the grass, this mechanism misfires. We apply it to relationships, goals, even trivial events, and it breeds anxiety. The brain confuses prediction with protection, and the result is that we live half in the present, half in an imagined future. Here's an analogy. Imagine watching a movie while constantly fast-forwarding to the last 5 minutes. You'd miss the details, the development, the richness of the story. Yet in life, we do exactly that. We jump ahead in our minds and then wonder why our days feel shallow or restless. Understanding this tendency is step 1. Step 2 is learning how to work with it. Because you can't completely turn off the brain's hunger for endings, it's wired in. But you can redirect it in healthier ways. One practical exercise is what psychologists call chunking the present. Instead of waiting for a grand ending, you give small, intentional closures to everyday experiences. For example, after finishing a meal, pause for 10 seconds to acknowledge it's over, rather than rushing to the next task. After a conversation, take a moment to summarize to yourself what it meant. By giving small events proper endings, you reduce the brain's anxiety about needing big finales. This rewires your attention so the present feels more complete without needing to project into the future. Another tool is reframing endings not as loss but as punctuation. Think of a period at the end of a sentence. Without it, the sentence has no shape. With it, the thought gains clarity. Similarly, endings give structure, not emptiness. The next time you find yourself dreading the end of a vacation, try viewing it as punctuation, the thing that makes the memory solid. Without the ending, the joy might blur. With it, the story is sealed. This mindset turns endings into allies instead of enemies. You can also practice what's called open narrative thinking. Instead of locking onto a specific ending, remind yourself that stories have multiple possible closures, not one. For instance, a job doesn't just end in resignation or retirement. It might evolve, shift, or be redefined by you. A relationship might not end in marriage or breakup. It could change form, become friendship, or teach you something that shapes your future. By loosening the grip on the one true ending, you release anxiety and allow yourself to experience the present with more curiosity. And then there's the deepest level, mortality itself. Our awareness of death is the ultimate driver of finalization. Whether consciously or not, much of our striving comes from knowing there is a final page. This is uncomfortable, but it's also the source of meaning. Imagine if life stretched on infinitely. Would love, art, or achievement hold the same weight? Probably not. It's precisely because endings exist that moments matter. The trick is to let mortality remind you of significance without letting it paralyze you with fear. Practices like stoic reflection, gratitude journaling, or even simply saying "this too will end" can transform anxiety into presence. Instead of clinging to life as if it must last forever, you savor it because it won't. Let's bring this down to your daily reality. The next time you feel restless at the end of your day, wishing you had done more, notice that your brain is searching for closure. Instead of scolding yourself, give the day a symbolic ending ritual. Write down 3 things you appreciated, even small ones. This signals to your brain that the story of today is complete, so it doesn't have to keep replaying loose threads in the background. Or when you feel anxious about a relationship's future, pause and ask, "What is the chapter I'm in right now teaching me?" Shifting focus from the imagined ending to the current chapter allows you to actually live the story instead of merely anticipating its finale. In all of this, the key insight is that the mind is a storyteller. It wants beginnings, middles, and endings. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. But when left unchecked, this feature pulls you out of the moment and into a constant rehearsal for conclusions. By noticing this, by practicing small closures, reframing endings as punctuation, and embracing the truth of mortality, you gain back the ability to dwell in the present without fear of its eventual fade. That's how you unlock the psychology of finalization and use it not to drain your joy, but to deepen it. When you begin to understand that your mind is always scanning for endings, you can also start to notice how this shapes your emotional landscape. For example, think of the uneasiness you feel on Sunday evenings. It's not just that the weekend is over. It's that your brain is narrating the end of freedom and preparing for the beginning of responsibility. This anticipatory framing can create anxiety that's disproportionate to the actual reality of Monday. In this way, the story your brain tells about endings becomes more powerful than the events themselves. Recognizing this pattern allows you to step outside of it and say, "I'm not actually living Monday yet, I'm living Sunday." That awareness creates space for choice. Let's also look at relationships. When you sense a partner pulling away, your brain may rush to construct the possible ending. It fills in the blank space with scenarios, often negative ones. Instead of engaging in what's happening, you find yourself rehearsing the breakup speech in your head. This is the brain's finalization instinct at work, trying to resolve uncertainty by imagining a conclusion. But here's the catch. Imagined endings are not the same as real ones. They drain your emotional energy without resolving anything. The practical takeaway is that when you notice yourself spinning narratives about how this might end, you can pause and redirect. Ask yourself, what do I actually know right now? This keeps you grounded in evidence, not speculation. Another everyday place where this shows up is in personal projects. Maybe you're writing a book, training for a marathon, or starting a side business. The excitement often peaks in the middle, but then fades as the ending feels too far away or uncertain. Your brain longs for closure, but when it doesn't see a clear finish line, it resists. That's why many projects stall midway. One solution is to create artificial micro-endings. Break the project into chapters, milestones, or sprints, and celebrate each completion. You're essentially tricking your brain into feeling closure along the way, which sustains motivation. This is a psychological toolkit you can apply to almost anything, from studying for exams to decluttering your home. By creating endings, you create momentum. Now, let's explore the philosophical angle once more, because it adds depth to our practical understanding. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger described humans as beings toward death. What he meant is that our awareness of mortality is not just something we confront at the end of life. It's the horizon against which we live every moment. The fact that life will end is what makes life urgent, meaningful, and personal. This perspective can sound heavy, but in practice it's liberating. Instead of seeing death as a shadow that looms, you can see it as a frame that makes every painting vivid. Think of it like art. A canvas without edges is chaos. A canvas with borders lets the image take shape. Mortality is that border. By accepting it, you free yourself to focus not on how this all ends, but on how I live within the frame. So how do you train your mind to shift from compulsively anticipating endings to using them as tools for meaning? Let's walk through some techniques you can actually use starting today. First, practice narrative awareness. Begin noticing the stories your brain is writing in real time. When you catch yourself thinking, "This friendship will probably end badly," or "This job will never last," label that thought as finalization mode. Just naming it weakens its grip. Second, try the practice of intentional closure. If you've had an argument, instead of replaying it endlessly, write down your version of the ending. This could be as simple as journaling. I expressed my feelings, they expressed theirs, and for now, that's where it stands. By giving the situation a temporary period instead of an open ellipsis, you calm your brain's need for completion. Third, embrace ritual. Humans throughout history have used rituals to provide closure. Funerals, graduation ceremonies, even the small act of blowing out birthday candles. Create personal rituals for endings in your life. Maybe you close your laptop with a mindful breath to end the workday, or you light a candle to mark the end of a stressful week. These signals satisfy the brain's craving for resolution without spiraling into anxious anticipation. Another actionable step is to shift focus from how it ends to how it unfolds. You can do this by practicing presence anchoring. Pick a simple grounding question like, "What part of this moment is alive right now?" If you're on a walk, it might be the feeling of air on your skin. If you're in a conversation, it might be the sound of laughter. By anchoring yourself in unfolding details, you keep the mind engaged in the narrative's middle, not its imagined end. Over time, this trains the brain to savor chapters rather than skim ahead. There's also a counterintuitive tool, using endings as motivators. When you remind yourself that an experience will conclude, it sharpens attention. Psychologists call this the scarcity effect. When something is limited, you value it more. You can use this by consciously reminding yourself, "This moment won't last," not as a source of dread, but as an amplifier of gratitude. For example, at the end of a meal, say to yourself, "That was the last bite." This small reflection enhances satisfaction. In relationships, occasionally pausing to remember that even long-term connections are finite can make you cherish the present conversation more deeply. Mortality itself can be used this way, not to terrify but to intensify living. Knowing that life is finite means that every day is not a rehearsal but the real performance. Now let's tie this back to the psychology of happiness and anxiety. Happiness often depends on how we frame experiences, and the ending frame is one of the strongest. If you become more intentional with endings, celebrating small closures, reframing loss as punctuation, using mortality as a motivator, you naturally create more positive highlight reels in memory. Anxiety, meanwhile, thrives on imagined finales. It takes uncertainty and fills it with catastrophic endings. By catching this process, labeling it, and practicing grounding techniques, you weaken anxiety's fuel. In this sense, mastering finalization isn't just an abstract idea, it's emotional self-defense. So next time you notice your mind racing toward the end, pause and remember, you are the narrator, but you don't have to skip ahead in the script. You can choose to stay in the unfolding scene, to experience the richness of the moment, and to write endings with more intention instead of fear. Life will always have endings, that is inevitable. But you can train your mind to see them not as dark conclusions, but as meaningful punctuation marks that give shape to the story you're living. And if this exploration of the psychology of endings unlocked something for you, if it helped you see your own thoughts and moments in a new way, then I invite you to support this channel. Like this video, share it with someone who might need a fresh perspective on how they frame their life, and subscribe to Mind Unlocked. This channel is your toolkit for better thinking, where we turn complex ideas from psychology and philosophy into practical guides for a clearer, richer, more meaningful life.